Hello, and welcome to another exciting story of tales of courage and kindness. I'm your lovely host, Miss Disney. Last time we learned about Pocahontas and how she showed kindness and courage. In this reading, we are going to be reading about Mulan. Mulan has always struggled to fit in. She wants to bring her family honor, but isn't sure how to do so while remaining true to herself. When her father is called to serve in the Imperial Army, Mulan seizes the opportunity to do right by her family. Disguising herself as a man, Mulan joins the army in her father's place and shows incredible bravery in fighting the Huns. Through courage, passion, and determination, she proves that anything is possible when you believe in yourself. And in Mulan's story, we are going to be reading The Village Hero. Written by Marie Chow and illustrated by Alice X. Zhang and Studio iBoix. Special thanks to cultural consultants David Lin, Flora Zhao, and Bill Imada at IW Group. Mulan, always the early riser, said Ling Ling with a broad grin. Mulan waved to the stable boy and dismounted from Khan. She had just come back from a ride in the woods, where she could be alone with her thoughts. You know me, she replied with a modest shrug. She tried to smooth her hair into some sort of order, embarrassed to find at least 2 leaves and a small twig tangle in it. As she led her horse to its stall and closed the gate, Sair, the village scholar, approached. Had a good ride? He asked. Mulan nodded politely and then stifled a sigh. She wasn't used to all the attention that came with being a war hero. Young men wanted to train with her or marry her. Young women wanted to befriend her or be like her. It was unsettling. As she made her way toward home, more neighbors greeted her with compliments and questions. It took several minutes of nodding and ing politely before Mulan finally escaped the well-wishers. She turned the corner onto a quiet street and almost ran into her neighbor May, who was struggling to carry 3 lanterns in a woven bag. May managed to juggle the lanterns without dropping one, but she lost her grip on the bag. Mulan dove for it, nearly tripping over her own feet before she righted herself with the bag dangling gracefully from one arm. Ta-da, she said sheepishly. May chuckled. Thank you, she said, grimacing as she tried to take the bag back. Mulan waved May's hand away. If you're going home, I might as well carry it for you. I'm headed that way too. I'd appreciate it, the older girl said, shifting the 3 lanterns in her arms. These aren't heavy or even that big, but they are awkward. Mulan laughed, happy to be having a normal conversation for once. It seemed that everyone else she encountered went out of their way to compliment her health, Khan's grooming, or the honor she brought to her family. Mulan eyed the lanterns May carried. Did you make all 3 of those lanterns for this week's festival? She asked. I'm still not done with mine, and I'm only decorating 1. May chuckled. I can't help myself. I know that most families make 1 with a simpler design, but I've always been a Zanzing Yi, 3 hearts, 1 mind. I can never settle on just 1 idea. May had always looked forward to the Lanterns Festival. In villages and cities all over China, people gathered at local temples to display their handmade lanterns and place candles inside to usher in the upcoming spring. May's favorite part of the tradition was making the lanterns. Year after year, her designs had become more complex and beautiful with practice. The girls stopped walking as May held out the lanterns, and Mulan examined each in turn. Like the lanterns other villagers made, May's were made of silk wrapped around a wood frame, and 2 handspans in height, but the similarities ended there. You've been so clever about these designs, Mulan said, admiring the Chinese symbols and tree shapes that May had embroidered on each one. They're wonderful alone, but when combined, the characters make the word forest. May bowed her head. I've always liked playing around with words. Mulan handed the lanterns back as the girls continued walking. When we light them, I'm sure everyone will appreciate what you've done. Her face brightened as she continued. I love when we're all gathered and enjoying the glow from the lanterns together. It's one of my favorite traditions. Mulan turned toward Mulan in surprise. I never would have guessed you cared so much about tradition. Why? Because I dressed up like a man and snuck into the army? Mulan asked. A girl can't break the rules and still like tradition? Mulan's tone was playful, so May laughed in response, but her face flushed. I'm sorry, was that rude? All I meant to say was, it's certainly not what most girls would have done. Mulan shook her head. I'm not offended. Actually, it's nice not to be complimented for once. May gave Mulan a questioning look. It sounds ungrateful to complain about compliments, and I know everyone means well, Mulan started, looking down at her feet. But I'm still the same girl I was before the war. I still can't sew or cook. I can't embroider lanterns or remember the 8 virtues that the matchmaker wanted me to learn. When I joined the army, I wanted to bring honor to my family, not endless attention to yourself, May asked, finishing Mulan's sentence for her. Mulan looked up at her neighbor. I take it you've noticed? As the 2 girls shared a quiet moment of understanding, Mulan found herself wondering why the 2 of them had never spoken before. May was only a couple years older than Mulan, and they'd been neighbors for years. Mulan supposed she'd always just assumed that they had nothing in common. After all, Mulan didn't have a lot in common with most girls. As they arrived at May's home, a few of the younger neighbor girls came up to Mulan, hoping for a moment with the village star. May took the bag Mulan had been carrying for her, and with a parting smile to her new friend, she went quietly into her home. At home, May opened her bag and examined the silk fibers she'd purchased in the market. Hello. Quilting was something her mother had taught her, and May took pride in every part of the process. There was something calming about combining fibers to make thread. Layering the cloth, sewing the pieces together, and embroidering the intricate designs, knowing that each part had been made with love and that each creation was unique. May felt the same about making the lanterns. Creating beautiful works of art was her way of bringing honor to her family. Her father came out of his bedroom. I saw you talking to Mulan outside, he said, sitting down across the table from May. What a daughter she has turned out to be. She has brought great honor to the Fa family. Yes, and she's still humble, May replied. A little different from other girls in our village. You do well to learn from her, her father said. That's what the matchmakers want these days, a girl like Mulan. May bowed her head. Yes, Baba, I understand. That girl can do anything, he continued. I hear she rides a horse better than any man in our village. Like the rest of the villagers, May admired Mulan for what the girl had done. She couldn't imagine disguising herself as a soldier, summoning the courage to join the army, training among warriors, or wielding any weapon heavier than a kitchen knife. She wouldn't have known how to fight one enemy, much less win an entire army. Perhaps more important, May wasn't sure she would have been brave enough to do any of these things if they'd been asked of her. May blinked and focused on the quilt she was making. She told herself it didn't matter whether other people noticed the care she put into her art. It was enough for May to know that it was a job well done. While May could not control how similar she was, or wasn't, to Mulan, she knew she had her own strengths. She could make beautiful things with her hands. She wished her father could be proud of her and the skills she did possess, but she also wished she could be brave like Mulan, the village hero. A week later, the night of the Lantern Festival had finally arrived. The whole village was abuzz about the night's festivities, when everyone would walk up the hill to the newly constructed temple and place candles in their lanterns, sing songs, and tell riddles. Mulan and May both left their homes just as the sun was setting, and they began walking along the path together. Mulan looked at the lantern May was carrying. "You didn't bring all three?" May shrugged. "I never intended to bring all of them. I just like to have a backup and, a backup for the backup." "Well, which one did you pick?" Mulan asked. May turned her lantern round so Mulan could see the design. Mulan moved to the side of the road and put her own lantern before taking May's creation and holding it up to the waning sunlight. "I love how you've embroidered the leaves," Mulan said. "Once you put the candle inside, the light will filter through in such a beautiful pattern." May tilted her head, shyly accepting her lantern back from Mulan. "You've looked at it more closely than even my father." "I'm fairly certain my father's just happy I finished mine in time. He always says I should know my strengths and be honest about my weaknesses. Embroidering, sewing, cooking, none of these are particular talents of mine." May sighed. "Consider yourself lucky," she said under her breath. "What do you mean?" Mulan asked. May blushed, almost wishing she hadn't said anything. But she couldn't shake the unspoken disappointment of her father's gaze, one that seemed to have eyes only for Mulan's accomplishments. "I suppose I meant that cooking and sewing won't bring honor to my family. Just ask my father." Mulan gave a snort. "What's that old saying? That dynasties are easier to change than personalities? People still value the same things we did yesterday. I look forward to the day when I can go back to being plain old Mulan, when the only thing anyone would say to me was that my rice pudding was tasteless." May laughed. "Rice pudding's a specialty of mine, actually. I could teach you if Mulan!" Zaire the scholar shouted from across the road, dragging his grown son in his wake. "My son Donging wanted to say hello to the village's great hero." Donging, who had always been shy, looked down at the ground and then at his father, a bit helplessly. "Hello, Mulan," he said, and his face burning red. After a pause, he raised his eyes and said, as an afterthought, "Hello, May." Zaire nudged his son and mumbled, "What a lovely lantern you've made, Mulan." Daging parroted, "What a lovely lantern you've made, Mulan." He reached for May's lantern, which Mulan was still holding. "Actually, this beautiful creation is May's," Mulan replied. Daging dropped the lantern in his embarrassment. Mulan and May both reached for it, but bumped into each other in the process. Zaire stepped backward to avoid having the girls crash into him, and accidentally kicked May's lantern, which rolled down the hill before anyone could grab it. May watched helplessly as Mulan chased after the lantern. She knew the lantern was ruined before Mulan picked it up, exposing gaping tears in the silk. The group went silent. Tears slowly filled May's eyes. Danging spoke first. I am so very sorry. I didn't mean it's okay, May said, her voice steady. For a moment, everyone's gaze was on Mulan as she carried the ruined lantern up the hill. She ran her hand softly over the embroidered tree, which had started to unravel. It's really okay, May said again. She opened her mouth to say something else, but her breath caught in her throat. Her gaze locked on something in the distance behind the group. Without another word, May started to run back toward the village. Daging frowned and peered sheepishly at Mulan. I tried to apologize, he said. I know it was an accident, Mulan said, watching May's retreating back. That's when she finally noticed what had caught May's eye. A plum of smoke, unmistakable in its color and intensity. This was no cooking fire. It was too dark and ashy for that. Without another word, Mulan took off after May. As she ran, Mulan couldn't quite pinpoint where the fire was, only that it was near the back of the village. The horse stalls? She hoped not. The hay would make the fire impossible to control, and Khan and the other horses would be trapped. The old temple? A definite possibility. Mulan had overheard some of the villagers say they still planned on hanging a lantern there, even though the new temple had finally been completed. As she came closer, she saw it was indeed the old temple that had caught fire. Mulan covered her mouth and nose with her sleeve and ran into the burning building. Inside the temple, her eyes watered within seconds after the sting of smoke. Flames licked up the temple's wall next to the blackened shell of a lantern, which Mulan guessed was the source of the fire. Where would she find enough water to put out the flames? Her home was only down the road, but Mulan knew that her family had already used most of the water she'd carried from the well that morning. The well itself was much farther away, almost in the center of the village, and the river, in the opposite direction, would take even longer to reach. As Mulan weighed the various options, she also took a moment to wonder where May was. When May had taken off at a run, Mulan had assumed she was headed toward the fire. But if so, where was she? Mulan began backing out of the temple. Heading into the village would at least increase the odds of running into someone else, of being able to organize help. She nearly crashed into May, who was just heading in, struggling to carry a vase of water and a pile of quilts. Take this, May said, putting down the vase and handing Mulan a quilt. I brought water too, but I couldn't carry enough to make a difference. I'm hoping these quilts will help. As Mulan unfurled the quilt in her hands, she couldn't help notice its intricate embroidery and beautiful design. There was no doubt in Mulan's mind that this was May's handiwork. May unfolded her quilt and started fanning the flames, coughing as the smoke filled the room. Mulan followed suit, whipping the beautiful blanket at the fire. But soon the girls realized that their efforts were only spreading the flames. What do we do now? Mulan asked May. The girls looked around themselves and at each other, an idea sparking in their minds at the same time. May started, What if we use the water to dampen the quilts? Mulan finished. For a brief moment, the girls shared a smile, sensing a spark of true friendship between them. Are you ready? Mulan asked. Let's do this, May said. A surge of adrenaline zipped up her spine. May poured the water from the vase she had brought onto both blankets. The two girls worked together to smother the flames with the damped quilts, which had become heavy with absorbed water. Little by little, they put out the worst of the blaze, but there were still smaller fires and embers glowing all around them, any one of which could burst into an inferno at any moment. Mulan continued to fight the flames, her eyes streaming with tears from the smoke. May began coughing harder, and Mulan turned around just in time to see the girl collapse. Mulan ran to May's side and quickly wrapped a singed quilt around her. Then she scooped May into her arms, thankful for all the strength training she'd gotten in the army, and carried her outside the temple to safety. But then a large crowd had gathered. Several villagers ran inside the temple, carrying small tankards of water to put out the remaining flames. The others swarmed around the girls, stepping back only when Mulan urged them to give May enough space and air to recover. The villagers spoke over one another in their excitement. "You put the fire out so quickly. How did you do it? Mulan, are you hurt?" "Of course she's not hurt. Mulan saved the day again. The girl's invincible." As the villagers babbled, Mulan focused on May, propping her up so she could breathe. At last, May coughed and slowly opened her eyes. The villagers quieted down as Mulan explained what had happened. It was May who noticed the fire first, and who was level-headed enough to bring these quilts from her home. She paused, running her fingertips over May's beautiful embroidery, which was now singed and ruined. She deserves the credit for controlling the blaze. May shook her head. "I couldn't have done it alone. You were so brave, and I just—" She started coughing again. Mulan's face turned serious. "You showed true courage today, May." "Well, I learned from the best," said May, blushing. As Mulan helped May to her feet, Zaire clapped his hands together. "What a fortunate village we are to have two female heroes." "May's the hero today," Mulan said firmly. May's father nodded. "I agree," he said, smiling in approval. He looked at his daughter. "You have made your family very proud." And with that, everyone cheered. May's eyes watered, either from the smoke or her father's words. Daging handed Mulan and May cups of water as an unspoken apology for earlier. "Did you make this quilt?" he asked May, who nodded. "Then perhaps you would sew one for our family," Zaire suggested. "It would be an honor to display such a beautiful quilt made by the young woman who saved the old temple." The other villagers nodded and started putting in their own requests for May's handiwork as her father looked on proudly. Mulan laughed. "Looks like I'll have to learn about lanterns and sewing from you. I wish you'd been with me in the army. I could have used your creative problem solving when I was trying not to burn down the palace." Mace gave a sly smile. "I'll teach you how to quit if you teach me how to ride a horse." "It's a deal," Mulan agreed. "I think we'll make a great team." Wow, what a story of Mulan, and what a great way that not only her, but also her friend May have learned how to be kind and courageous. And as we all know, Mulan is strong-willed, courageous, resourceful, fearless, a team player, and thoughtful. And her dream is to bring honor to her family. Her heroic moment? Saving the Emperor from the Huns with her trusty sidekick, the invincible Mushu. And her famous quote? "My name is Mulan. I did it to save my father. It was the only way." Now, here's my question for you. What was your bravest moment?